Until a new DK game is announced, we're all caught up on the key games that made this guy such a cultural icon for video gaming as a whole. At the moment, we're at the end of the road.
Because Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is a lush, polished, and incredibly fun game. When it came to the collectathon genre, Donkey Kong 64 was kind of the medicine we needed to take. It's too easy to get lost in the memories of the past, especially when they're as interesting as this. What was next for Donkey Kong? It was the million-dollar question that so many people were asking. A paradigm shift was upon us, an entirely new dimension had been unleashed for the industry to mess around with, and the community was eagerly looking forward to a new generation of games. But the name Donkey Kong was standing tall, rounding out its impressive run on the Super Nintendo and painting a clear picture that this franchise, one that had left its mark on arcades long ago, had come back with more ambition than ever before. But how would this strange new world of 3D change Donkey Kong? Because we knew it would. We all knew. We knew that a series packed with this much polish and creativity would continue on this new system, pushing the envelope for platformer gameplay once more. It was obvious. It was inevitable. But we'd have to wait, because Rare's first piece of Kong-tent to hit the Nintendo 64 wasn't a platformer at all. Hell, DK himself wasn't even in the game. That's not to say that Rare didn't have the experience to bring the Kong name to the Nintendo 64 with such excellence. At this point, they had already set the stage for what would be a defining moment for the company, a generation where they would repeatedly release banger after banger on a system that never shed the studio's influence. With 3 high-profile releases under their belt already and one of their most ambitious projects ever still needing just a bit more time in the oven, it was the moment to bring one of the most recognizable brands of their history to this new age of gaming. In November 1997, Diddy Kong Racing was released for the Nintendo 64. It's super fascinating to me that Rare's constantly morphing racing title originally had no connection to the Kong name at all, only gaining the young simian hero as the poster child after several delays of Rare's Project Dream game. The push for a big holiday hit for 1997 brought Diddy Kong Racing to the forefront of Rare's library at the time, but with Nintendo's own Mario Kart 64 releasing less than a year prior, comparisons were made from fans and the press alike, and you could argue that those comparisons never faded. We're still talking about this today, of course. Since its initial N64 release, Diddy Kong Racing has gotten an installment on the Nintendo DS, but the series that never was seems to be perpetually connected with unreleased projects such as Donkey Kong Racing from Rare and a concept pitch from Climax Studios called Diddy Kong Racing Adventure. This was a game that very well could have taken off and continued alongside Nintendo's other kart racing series, but all the could-have-beens aside, Diddy Kong Racing on the Nintendo 64 has grown in support as the years moved on, and I never really understood why. For new eyes, it stood in the shadow of its counterpart, but after spending a lot of time with this game, well, I do have my thoughts. The kart racing subgenre has expanded significantly over the decades, leading to a pretty packed collective of mascot characters behind the wheels of their vehicles. But Diddy Kong Racing certainly has something special, something that so many other kart racers just haven't been able to fully match. Whatever that something is, there's no doubt it's tied to Rare's creative signature, because Diddy Kong Racing is absolutely worth a damn. The main concept of a racing party featuring a wild bunch of cartoon characters would be pretty endearing on its own, but having that party crashed by a giant space wizard pig thing feels like an appropriately surreal move for Rare. The DKC games managed to be both cartoonish and kind of uncanny in their style, but even the trilogy's later games don't match what's really pushed in Diddy Kong Racing. That happy-go-lucky vibe contrasts deeply with the danger at play. Wizpig himself is a menacing figure, thanks in no small part to his large size and almost unhinged laughter that occurs during several of his cutscenes. His maniacal glare mesmerizes on the game's box art and even in the instruction manual, as the player reads the backstory of Diddy and Friends' adventure. But even with Wizpig casting a long shadow over the tone, Diddy Kong Racing isn't dark by any means. Despite going up against such a threatening figure, the Kong hero and his compatriots still treat much of the game like a celebration. High stakes can make a game more intense, sure, but Diddy Kong Racing pushes the needle just enough away from leisurely, keeping things competitive and laid back, but still grabbing the player's attention with a scenario that encourages tackling those steep odds. Right off the bat, I will say that this is one of the most endearing character selection screens I've ever seen in a video game, ever. There's something so infectious about seeing the entire team bounce and jive to the music playing, how they introduce themselves when the player selects them,
I'm Banjo!
Or how they irritably freak out when the player changes their mind and moves to another racer.
Whoa!
It really shows how a little personality can go a long way, how upbeat animations and quirky sound design can mean a lot in giving a game's presentation that extra boost. It's an early but very memorable moment that shows Rare's incomparably charming spirit on full display. The game's main attraction is Adventure Mode, a journey to a fully explorable island, the central hub for the entire campaign, and the home of Diddy's friend Timber the Tiger. From the outset, this island comes across as a barren, empty space without many things to do beyond simply getting from world to world, and, in a moment of brutal honesty, I wouldn't think that's inaccurate. Much of what you do on the island could easily be represented and coherently accessed via a menu. The hub doesn't really contribute anything to the actual racing challenges, acting as a primitive substitution for a level select that doesn't hold enough buried treasure to be worth sinking a ton of time in investigating. Its long-term purpose isn't really fulfilled here. But in my own self-awareness, calling this type of design primitive leaves a bad taste in my mouth. The very idea of having an explorable hub world like in Diddy Kong Racing is oddly progressive for its time, especially in the early years of 3D graphics when so many developers were trying to fully understand how to navigate with a third dimension in tow. As a racing game with the camera almost always directly behind the player, Diddy Kong Racing sizably lucks out, keeping navigation smooth and limiting any clutter and misdirection that can come from a bad camera. The wide open spaces are fantastic outlets to learn how to use all three vehicles, from drifting in the car to diving in the plane. The vehicle challenges against Island Guide Taj lead the player through various passages and pathways, thoughtfully touring the layout of the island and giving players native hints as to where they can explore. The way Rare was able to make these pathways into a large, easy-to-navigate space has to be commended, the kind of intent that many other open worlds tend to ignore, even nowadays. And even once you enter a world from the hub, you still interact with objects in an explorable 3D space, like driving through the giant doors to start a challenge, or looking around to find the trophy race platform to start a Grand Prix gauntlet. Even the small touches like honking the horn to get NPCs' attention in the overworld
Hello, friend.
is such a brilliant subtlety. It's not required to do it all, you can simply run into the characters to talk to them, but those little moments do so much to make the island feel like an actual world. Even better, some world doors are in pretty well hidden places, and you can even find a handful of golden balloon items floating in tucked away areas of the map, a key expansion on the collectible hunting of Rare's past titles. The studio's creative drive of the Nintendo 64 era is proudly on display in Diddy Kong Racing's hub. Menus are serviceable ideas, of course, so serviceable that they are still in Diddy Kong Racing, though it'd be a major misstep on my part to overlook the effort put into the island's design. It really seems like the developers were aiming for the same sense of discovery as they had already explored on the Super Nintendo, and would eventually refine further later on in the Nintendo 64's lifespan. Because Diddy Kong Racing's hub nimbly skirts around its simple design and technical limitations, instead providing a fond visit to a playground where the player can practice their skills, or simply vibe in between the more serious challenges. To no one's surprise, the races are the meat of Diddy Kong Racing, but even they show Rare riding high on ambition, desperately adding spins on established formulas. As the rush to the checkered flag starts, the player is immediately introduced to Diddy Kong Racing's power-up system. In contrast to Mario Kart 64, the colored balloons that scatter the tracks don't provide singular power-ups based on your position in the race. Grabbing a specific balloon color provides one of 5 different power-up types. Red balloons provide offensive projectiles, blue balloons give a boost ability, green provides a droppable trap, yellow offers a protective shield, and rainbow magnet that draws players to another racer's position. There are a lot of things that make this system fascinating, but the most notable is the stackable power-ups. Consecutively grabbing balloons of the same color upgrades the ability in tow, such as a linear target missile becoming a homing missile, or increasing the longevity of an activated shield. This adds a fantastic layer of strategy to the races. Getting a power-up of a different color causes you to lose the previous power-up in tow, and if you've already upgraded the first one to a higher tier, the different color balloons can quickly become obstacles to avoid instead of advantages to gain, a great way to make these design concepts into multi-purpose mechanics. And with particular classes of items being available regardless of your current ranking in the race, Diddy Kong Racing sacrifices spontaneity for a strong sense of deliberation and intent behind its track design. Really, it comes down to your skill as a player, all but eliminating those messy, less predictable applications that some fans might find obnoxious or even unfair. But on the other hand, while I do find this style of power-up design to have a lot of hidden complexities, it can make races feel less dynamic, especially if you're already way ahead of or far behind the pack. An advantage of Mario Kart's position-based item distribution is that players that are further back would generally receive more powerful items, leading to a rubber band difficulty where even if you were far in first place, you were never entirely safe. An attack from a distant racer could totally destroy an easy win, and that drive to keep you on your toes made Mario Kart less predictable. And while it's certainly a controversial design choice, it always provided a slim chance for victory. That's simply not the case with Diddy Kong Racing. If you're far enough ahead of the pack, you really don't have too much to worry about. You can continue getting power-ups that remain useful in almost any position, like boosts or shields. And unless you make a number of mistakes, good luck losing your top ranking by the stage's end. This works the other way around as well, where if you're in last place, you don't have many opportunities to come from behind, as someone who's well ahead of the other racers still has access to those more helpful abilities. The zipper pads also feel a bit too overpowered, especially if you use the tricky method of dropping your acceleration right before driving over one, leading to a huge gain in speed. That boost is enormous. Missing just one of these can set you back severely, even just against the game's CPUs. And with little room to come back from behind with items, many races can feel decided only a lap or two into the challenge. Diddy Kong Racing doesn't leave much room for error with its gameplay systems, even against less seasoned players. Yes, this does put a lot of power into the player's own skill, eliminating the unpredictability factor that might distort a clear, balanced challenge, but it unfortunately makes races less interesting as a result. There is something perversely appealing about witnessing some weird, almost slapstick stroke of luck, good or bad, right at the checkered flag, and while I would argue that Mario Kart gets away with it a bit too much, Diddy Kong Racing's more straight-ahead systems tend to lead to less dynamic races. Still, credit is due to the tracks themselves, which constantly give off a theme park vibe, with plenty of unique elements and set pieces, far more than its immediate comparable of the time. Boost loops, alternate paths, and plenty of contextually appropriate hazards are everywhere, with each locale shining with a brilliant sense of place. The aesthetics alone are right on the money, but varied terrain and altitudes keep things lively and full of energy. There are many ways to navigate through a track's layout, and combining that versatility with both useful power-ups and a less restrictive selection of vehicles, it feels so much deeper than what you might expect from a kart racing game. There was clearly a lot of thought put into how the tracks are designed. After wrapping up the main courses, the player must take on the world's boss character on their signature track. These tracks are very simple in structure, but what makes them so unique is the boss's defining abilities. For example, Tricky the Triceratops rounds out the Dino Domain world with a spiraling track up a mountain. Tricky is a tough racer who can squash the player if they collide with him, bringing them to a near halt, but he is still susceptible to offensive power-ups. Each boss race is custom-made for the challenge itself. While there might be some familiar environmental hazards, it's great to see tracks designed fully with their singular objective in mind. Levels like this often end up feeling deliberate, with very few compromises in place. Once again, this is a design direction that builds up Diddy Kong Racing's world, making it feel much more than a simple string of disconnected racetracks. The execution of its boss races are attentive and focused, making them some of the most interesting bits of the campaign. The track designs, boss challenges included, have a lot going for them, and while that versatility and open-endedness does add plenty of depth, I don't think that depth is really explored in the best way possible. What I mean by that is that Diddy Kong Racing tries to add extra modes and objectives across each track's layout, which leads to mixed results in practice. The initial battle for first place is a real rush, a simple but effective introduction to the locale, challenging enough to keep players on their toes, but not too hard as to demotivate them. Once each stage is done and the world boss is defeated, it's on to the silver coin challenges, where the player must collect all of the silver coins scattered throughout the track in addition to taking first place. The coins often require taking alternate routes, so you have to be more conscientious in how you progress down the raceway, instead of simply taking the one true path and mad dashing it to the finish line. And with a first place ranking still being part of the objective, this is a tricky balancing act with very little room for slip-ups. But damn, the silver coin challenges just aren't very fun for that exact reason. While it's admirable seeing Rare push the player outside their comfort zone and demand a bit more lateral thinking to succeed, the tracks in Diddy Kong Racing aren't really built for this. Some earlier stages are simple enough where the silver coins are well in view, and some later ones retain that visual spectacle to keep you engaged, but this feels like Rare reusing the tracks for a purpose that doesn't really fit that comfortably. The player's first step is uncovering where the coins are in the map. Some can be concealed around tight corners or in passages that are tough to navigate without losing speed. In a game where you need to be fast and on point with your reflexes at every opportunity, scouring a racetrack for surprisingly well-hidden collectibles feels almost counterintuitive for the fast and aggressive pace of a racing game of all things. As a result, it's a design format that demands replaying stages over and over until you know where the coins are, then grabbing them within a window that's so limiting that even a single misstep can ruin your run entirely. While that style of gameplay does have its appeal, and I'd be lying if I said there weren't any games where I think it's pulled off well, Diddy Kong Racing doesn't have too much else to make these silver coin challenges compelling. They're a repetitive revisiting of the tracks at best, and a total design incompatibility at worst. Then once that's done, it's onto the trophy race, a Grand Prix style of races where your place at the end of each race determines how many points you receive, with the winner having the most points at the end of the series. Like the silver coin challenges, these are just a method of reusing tracks for another purpose, but in the case of the trophy races, you don't even have the curiosity of looking for collectibles as you race. In fact, it's the exact opposite of the silver coin challenges, where you're simply racing against slightly more difficult CPU opponents, all without any unique change that requires you to think and approach the track's designs differently. This is what I mean when I say that the depth and versatility in Diddy Kong Racing's tracks aren't explored that well. There's a lot of content here, but it is content that either doesn't naturally mesh with the propulsive track design, or somehow doesn't do enough differently to justify playing the same track over and over again. I'm sure there could have been a middle ground, a way to entice players to return to existing tracks with a fresh objective and adjusted perspective, but Diddy Kong Racing is at its best without all of these extra bits when the entire goal is just to wind up in first place. For much of the adventure, it feels like unfocused, unnecessary padding. And once again, the name of the game here is focus. All efforts considered, Diddy Kong Racing is at its best when it retains a clear, undistorted vision in its gameplay, one custom built for its purpose without trying to accommodate extra modes, styles, and attributes. Racetracks constructed primarily for a particular type of race, boss challenges that don't reuse level designs in their execution, even battle modes with unique backdrops and rule sets. These are Diddy Kong Racing refuting redundancy and emphasizing quality over quantity. I'm not even sure if it was a good idea to have several of the tracks support multiple vehicle types. Props to even considering that idea, as it does make these tracks pretty transformative when compared, but it's not enough for them to feel 100% distinct from each other. Diddy Kong Racing's content gets familiar to the point of exhaustion, especially when you're trying to clear every objective and complete the game to max percentage. Coming from a studio that has encouraged players to get everything and do everything in their games, feeling that repetition sink in is not a flattering vibe. I honestly think a less is more direction could have made Diddy Kong Racing much more of a joy to see through to the very end. As it stands right now, though, there's simply too much here to evade that fatigue. After getting the full picture, it's totally clear that Diddy Kong Racing is not a genre shakeup. Many of its core mechanics are done soundly, but without any grand evolutionary statement for racing gameplay as a whole. Admittedly, the category has had to do a lot to show evolution, as simply getting from point A to point B before your rivals isn't something that's easy to progress from. To the passing eye, Diddy Kong Racing is just another racing game, another entry in a long-standing tradition, one that stands in 1997 and nowhere else. But it doesn't take long to see beyond that veil, that Diddy Kong Racing makes a compelling, totally supported case that the little things do end up mattering, especially when these minute creative differences begin to stack. The upgradable abilities, the open hub world, the infinitely charming presentation, these all stem from the same kind of attitude that Rare would eventually be renowned for as the Nintendo 64 era came to a close. Even when they weren't making monumental strides for genre after genre, like they had done time and time again during that age, Rare was always a curious studio, one who fully understood that those tiny sparks could easily burst into supernovas of captivating video games. I think that's where Diddy Kong Racing's major statement holds the most water. Despite its padding and conflicted sense of focus in its modes, you won't see the devs heaving over, gasping for breath after chasing trends or idols for miles on end. While they both occupy the same genre, Diddy Kong Racing is not a Mario Kart clone. This was a title that the studio desperately wanted to make on its own terms, under its own creative rules. It couldn't be clearer. Donkey Kong Month is an important time of year for me for many reasons, but the more I dive into Diddy Kong Racing and its cavalcade of inventive ideas, I realize how distant it is from Donkey Kong and this celebration that I've set up for myself. Despite DK's upbeat sidekick being front and center on the game's box art, this doesn't really feel like a Donkey Kong game at all. I mean, sure, there are story beats and characters that have very small connections to existing Donkey Kong Country lore, but with Diddy's inclusion being propelled by marketability purposes, and the developers going on the record to say that avoiding using DK himself was intentional, Diddy Kong Racing seems like a very far outlier in the series' catalog. This game's clear desire to be something new, with the biggest thing tethering it to Kong history being a simple drive to sell more copies. Even noting it during a DK month is kind of cheating a bit. Kinda, sorta, maybe. But I don't think it really matters. I feel strong enough in my power to say that Diddy Kong Racing is a damn fun kart racing game, one so much greater than the sum of its parts, and one that continues to stand as a clear indicator of its studio's insatiable creative spark. Rare has history. They have recurrence amongst their game direction, and I'd be a fool to say that they didn't stick to their guns in some regard throughout their catalog. But ambition can get you far, and Rare took it all to heart, resulting in a title well deserving of both its immediate and its eventual support. It's wild to finally experience Diddy's kart racing conquest, and I'm hoping that Rare's ambition that's so visible in Diddy Kong Racing is felt as strongly throughout today's gaming world too.